All right, everybody. Well, let's get started. And my name is Zorian. I'm actually one of the founders of A-Team. I sometimes do these webinars, and I do have a lot of fun with them. We have an open, big conference room space here with a ton of people who actually like to join in and listen in live. So if you hear the noise and all that, it's think of it as like a big open space concert, just about performance management, not rock and roll. So with no further ado, um, let's get going. And we're speaking today about tips for ongoing performance management. Big, interesting area today that a lot of executives, and especially starting with HR professionals and HR executives and experts, covering this area. So that we're living in the day and age of performance management being a big topic. So let's talk about performance management in the context of Wikipedia. That's the first source we all go to in order to understand what anything means. And what exactly is performance management? Well, Wikipedia defines it as a couple of activities which ensure that goals, we highlight goals, are consistently being met. And the reason we emphasize goals is because how can you manage any kind of performance if you don't have a clear objective towards which that performance is directed? So it can't be something in vacuum. You can't manage something that you're not being clear about or setting an objective for. Otherwise, how can you possibly manage it, right, and direct it? And again, process by which organizations align resources, systems, employees to strategic objectives. Um, if you look at Deloitte, there's a part of Deloitte is this organization called Burson, focused on human capital management, HR related information and surveys and reports. They have this slide in one of their presentations called Modern Performance Management and Next Generation Recognition and Rewards. And it's basically, first of all, a set of management practices that establish measurable goals and objectives for employees, right? Again, just like Wikipedia, can't really have performance management without measurable goals and objectives. And just as importantly, the point of setting goals and objectives, um, that's like the first point in the definition. It's not like, a peripheral thing. It's just a primary tip of the spear, right? And ultimately, this bullet point here is using information to improve performance through coaching, compensation, development, and other means, etc. So, but what is ongoing performance management, right? And ongoing is really about continuous effort, clear goals from the tip of the spear perspective, continuous check-ins, and we'll talk about check-ins later, and ongoing two-way feedback, right? You can't have somebody be managed effectively and their performance be managed effectively without the feedback component, right? It's not just telling them, it's actually a two-way, which is a conversation that is concentrated on developing your talent, right? So why is performance management so important? And this is a slide from, again, from Deloitte Burson, from a presentation, Is Your Performance Management Healthy, in Top 10 Keys to Success, just from a couple of years ago. And it's the process that defines and communicates your culture, your expectations, and how managers will behave, right? And it's funny that in the last point here, they say, but in many cases, performance management is there to create control, mitigate risk, and give executives insights into people, not to improve performance. That's a very important. That's a very important takeaway, and one that they've deliberately, I think, bolded and italicized here. And we'll see this theme throughout the presentation here, because ultimately it's not about control. I mean, you can get control through performance management, but that's a completely misusing performance management, and not only misusing it in terms of what it's meant to do, but actually not applying it correctly. In which case, it really isn't performance management after all. So just remember that it is for improving performance, for developing your talent, right? Not for compliance, control, and mitigating risk. Um, so let's jump into this section. It's a very important one here, and with a lot of data. So if you like data, you're gonna get excited about this section. And if you hate data, it's okay. We'll make it fun, right? We'll just give you some interesting takeaways you can take back and learn, and actually edify your own organization with it. So what challenges do we face? Well, first of all, let's start with this. 70% of a typical organization's operating cost is your workforce, right? 70% is the total operating cost of your workforce, which includes obviously everything from payroll to benefits to 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 everything you're spending on your people. That's 2/3 of what your company spends every year in and year out. And yet, there are many problems um, that that are ingrained in managing this workforce of yours, this human capital for which you spend 70% of your money every year. Let's start with this. McKinsey had this great report, The State of Human Capital. And in the executive summary, they say worldwide and in organizations of every type, people processes, people processes are failing to keep pace with a changing business landscape. So things having to do with human capital and managing your human capital are not working really well. There's this research from Harvard, right, published just 2 years ago, or actually a year ago. I'm sorry, it's in the footnotes 2016. Managers are uncomfortable communicating with their direct reports. Right, that's crazy, right? Managers are uncomfortable giving feedback. That this is like taken um, right out of the chart headline. Yeah, let me say that again. Managers are uncomfortable giving feedback. Does that make any sense? How can managers, you're obviously paying them for the very specific uh, function, which is managing people, and that part of managing people is directly giving them feedback on their performance. How can it be the case that managers are uncomfortable doing that? That is their job. But you read it right. So there's all these problems that managers themselves cause, and they're not really doing the feedback part really well. Then there's a similar research that was done a year prior to this one that I just showed you in 2015. What are employees complaining about most with regard to managers? And this has a lot to do also with feedback, with getting direction meaning objectives, goals, and overarchingly, if you read all these, it really can be kind of culminated in the concept of failing performance management process, right? Not getting recognition, which by the way is part of performance management. Not getting direction, part of performance management. Not meeting with employees, the third item here on the list. You, Performance management is management. You're not meeting with people, you're not managing them, you're not managing performance, etc. Towers Watson, they found in their research in 2015, 81% of employers say that their managers, this is companies who retain these managers and have these managers work there and on the payroll, they're spending too little time in ongoing conversations with employees about performance. 81% of employers admit this. 8 out of 10. 62% of employers say that managers spend insufficient time helping employees set goals. That's a complete fail of performance management. 63% of employers say their managers spend 4 hours or less per year per employee on performance management. In an entire year, so like 1 hour per quarter. That's it, right? That's just not very good at all. There are tons of statistics from Gallup, which I'm sure if you're an HR executive or a CEO of a company or a chief operating officer or manager of any kind, I'm sure you've heard of Gallup, right? Big organization. They're kind of like the McKinsey consulting of human capital management. And they have a ton of statistics about significant problems with employees being disengaged at work. I mean, look at this. 70% of U.S. workers not engaged at work. And when people hear, I've noticed this, when people hear the word engagement or employee engagement, they ignore it or kind of look down upon that. They think it's some soft, squishy topic. Well, it's not. It's not, because they're actually measuring it, real hard data, and linking it to performance, to companies being more competitive, more successful inside the workplace, to be to be successful in the marketplace. These are real hard numbers, right? No joke here. Companies with highly engaged workforces outperform their peers by 147% in earnings per share. It's right here on the right. This is real. So let's now bridge over into traditional performance management and annual reviews and talk about that. So Institute for Corporate Productivity says the time and money spent on performance management is actually not offset by any improved results in the business. That's just, if this is real, and oh, by the way, it is, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't. But if this is real, and this is real, that's that just means it's a horrible waste of time to do the performance management practices that are legacy and outdated and are traditional and not modernized, because it's not offset by any improvement in your business. Why are we doing it? A slide from Deloitte on performance management. Only 12% of companies believe their existing performance management process is worth the time put into it. Basically 12 out of 100, you can say, 1.2 out of 10 companies actually believe that that performance management is actually worth the time put into it. That's that's not good, because pretty much 9 out of 10 believe it's not worth the time. 58% of executives believe that their current performance management drives neither employee engagement nor high performance, right? Why are we doing it? Or rather, better question is probably, why are we doing it in the wrong way? That's not driving performance from employees or employee engagement. Why are we doing it the wrong way? Um, Corporate Executive Board and Society for Human Resource Management have these statistics. 95% of managers are dissatisfied with their company's performance review. 90% of HR professionals don't believe their company's performance reviews provide accurate information. This is HR executives who are empowering and supporting this. 9 out of 10 of them don't believe in it. That's incredible. Again, why are we doing it? Or why are we doing it the way that it's being done right now? 66% of performance management processes misidentify high performance. Holy smokes. The purpose of performance management and performance appraisals and reviews is to identify these high performers. These are the people that drive your company forward. And if you're not identifying them in 66% of the cases, that's really, really impactful in your business in a negative way. Again, 2/3 of employees say their performance review process interferes with productivity. Employees say it isn't relevant to their job. This is employees. And then employees feel performance reviews are not worth the time invested. So very consistent things from all these organizations across the board. Mercer did this research 4 years ago. They said only 3% of companies, very few, reported that their overall performance management delivers exceptional results. 97% report that it doesn't. Great. A former senior vice president of people ops at Google wrote in his book, and this was in Fast Company, performance management as practiced by most organizations has become a rule-based bureaucratic process existing as an end in itself, right? Rather than actually shaping performance. Employees hate it, managers hate it, even HR hates it. So I'm beating that point or beating it like a dead horse, is that the expression? A little bit too much perhaps. So let's talk about the end of traditional performance reviews, and then in the following section we'll talk about um, how to actually do it correctly in a non-traditional but modern ongoing manner. So there are a lot of articles from Harvard Business Review on reinventing performance management, um, the performance management revolution, articles in the Washington Post, uh, about the problems of performance management. We highlighted this point at the end. Endless paperwork at the bottom here. The evaluation criteria so utterly unrelated to our jobs, etc., etc. I mean, you've seen this before. You wouldn't be here. We all wouldn't be here if that wasn't something we were already fully aware of. So I'm probably just absolutely ad nauseum overstating the obvious here. But there are some just interesting takeaways, and some of them are comical. I mean, the Washington Post had this article, and they said they're designed as though they're Russia in the 60s. I really was entertained by that point. Totally out of date, right? And especially for workers of younger generations, right? I mean, look at the millennial statistics, right? The younger generation is I think the latest stat is like 70% of our workforce today. And the old school traditional performance management processes and performance reviews, they're just not working. And that quotes, why then, pray tell, do we still do performance reviews? Um, Washington Post also said that uh, why must we continue to have these awkward conversations and basically which both sides try to recall what employees accomplished nearly 12 months ago and to make excuses for broaching uncomfortable subjects. Again, corporate executive board talks about um, performance reviews get pretty bad reviews themselves, wildly inaccurate, ineffective, surprisingly inadequate, etc., etc., etc. New Yorker talks about, they had an article, it was great, push against performance reviews. There was a great story covered in multiple publications about Adobe, why they abolished annual performance reviews, right? And we'll actually talk about later how Medtronic's Vice President of Human Resources talked about performance reviews being sacred cows. But over here they said they noticed performance review, um, noticed that the annual performance review is such a central part of the human resources job she had been hired to do wasn't much of a resource to the humans it served. So this talks about Donna Morris, who joined Adobe as a senior director of global talent management. At one point, the planning alone took 9 months. Are you kidding me? 9 months to plan for this? It was like preparing to give birth to a child. And that's her quote. It was like, why does this take so long? Does this really drive the business return? Ultimately, the arrow at the end points that she was promoted to Senior Vice President of People and Places. And there's a reason for it, because she abolished the old school performance reviews. She concluded that employees hated them and they weren't very useful. Well, clearly, based on the statistics we've seen in the last couple of minutes, that is very much the case. Donna Morris explained that the performance review is a dreaded dental appointment. Very funny. Um, Adobe's annual process, according to this article, required 80,000 hours from 2,000 managers, right? Basically, mathematically, that equates to needing a staff of 40 people to do this process. That's ridiculous, right? And we will definitely talk about the alternative to this, where this kind of ridiculous time waste is not required and where the results are actually great, right? And you'll see why this type of 80,000 hours factor is a non-factor in the modern world. I'll explain that. Deloitte internally, and this was published in Harvard Business Review, Deloitte said, we tallied the numbers of hours the organization was spending on the performance management and found that completing the forms, holding the meetings, creating the ratings, it consumed close to 2 million hours a year. Incredible. Incredible. I mean, they're a big organization, but still. Uh, So what are some of the additional problems that amplify this situation with annual reviews and the old school traditional performance management process? There's all these biases. I mean, you're all really aware of these. We have a blog post on it. If you want to read it, you can search on Google. The recency, like, in terms of the time frame, you have to remember things from forever ago, earlier in the year, at the end of the year. It makes no sense, right? Comparison biases. There's all these problems and why this process doesn't work. There are books written about this. Get rid of the performance review. That's actually a book. They purport to be objective. They're not objective. This is a professor at UCLA. This is a great book, Abolishing Performance Appraisals. For many people, the whole idea of not doing them is almost seen as irresponsible. It's too funny because actually not doing them is the most responsible thing you can do, right? This is Mary Jenkins, who was an HR consultant and wrote this book. Um, Dr. Tim Baker, so many managers and employees told me that they dread this performance review and thought of it as a waste of time. Again, just absolutely repeating everything we discussed in terms of statistics earlier in the last 23 minutes, but it's just ad nauseum, nonstop tsunami of existing problems brought to the surface, and that are absolutely factually true. This is a problem. These performance management processes of the old times that are sacred cows that people, as in that quote a few slides before, think of as irresponsible to not do. They're a horrible problem. It's irresponsible to do them, not to avoid doing them. Um, it's never been shown to motivate anyone to do anything but try to avoid it. But nobody feels like they have any alternative. And I'm here to tell you they do. I'm here to tell you they do. Uh, and it's a well-defined new modern process that's working increasingly more and more globally. And many companies are picking up on that and implementing it to end this dreaded, ineffective, and problematic old school traditional performance review. It's a very high level. Look, traditional performance review is too complex and rigid, rife with biases, frustrating for everyone, HR including. Happens once a year, shouldn't. And the result is it doesn't improve performance, does not develop your people, not real time when everything is moving so fast. Um, it's coming to an end, and actually Deloitte had these three great points. The existing process is too complex. Most managers believe it is not worth the time put into it. It's not developmental. It's just not developmental, right? That's what you want out of this process. You want it to develop your people, improve performance, drive your talent forward. It just doesn't do that. And a major shift is taking place in management today, something that takes place only every few decades, right? So this is actually really big. This is big stuff. Is there a better way? Yes, there is. So Deloitte, again, first let me talk about what we feel is the hottest and most disruptive area of HR right now, the redesign of performance management. More than 60% of all companies are redesigning or have redesigned their performance management process, typically moving from top-down ratings and rankings to a feedback-centric, developmental, often ratingless model. Forrester says, going forward, we believe employee performance will be transformed to deliver results using continuous methods and advanced technologies. Continuous methods, not once a year, not even really once a quarter, right? In fact, I will tell you it's once a week. We're going to start getting more technical here, but in the remaining 35 minutes of this presentation, more technical. And advanced technologies, meaning that it's not like ad hoc. There are technologies that, and by the way, of course, we're that technology, right? But I'm not here to promote ourselves. I'm here to talk about the process. And I'll tell you, technologies definitely are developed and engineered to make this process effective and work, right? So the traditional outdated approach, as you can see on this slide, actually collapses everything together. Annual reviews, annual goals, and compensation. And that's all completely wrong. This is one of the key reasons it hasn't been working in the past. especially the compensation component. I know that's kind of like, how can that be? Well, 100% don't collapse compensation into it. The new approach, the modern ongoing performance development approach, it's these three that work and interwork, but they're not collapsed into one. They're not one and the same. So setting objective, we talked about earlier in the presentation, remember the Wikipedia definition? Remember the Deloitte definition of performance management? What is the tip of the spear? The tip of the spear is setting goals. And I'm talking about agile goals, not these once a year. Let me go back to that former slide that collapses everything together. Annual reviews, they don't work. Annual goals, they don't work. So you need agile goals. They're not annual, they're agile, they're quarterly, but checked in on weekly basis. They're checked in on a weekly basis, but they're quarterly. Quarterly, 4 times a year, is much more digestible and easier for people to understand, comprehend, wrap their heads around. And then you break it down into weekly components. About 8% during the week needs to be completed, 12 weeks towards the end of the quarter, right? And during that weekly check-in, and we'll talk about check-ins in a minute. Check-in is a thing. It's a thing right now, right? You check in on that weekly, you understand where you stand versus where you should be. You understand if you're making progress, taking the ball down the field effectively in these 112 chunks every week, right? The next part of the ongoing modern process is quarterly, mid-year, and annual meetings. Not annual meetings, quarterly and mid-year and annual, right? And the quarterly ones and the mid-year ones, they more tactically summarize and discuss the things that happen during those weekly check-ins, right? And then at the end of the year, you can still do that annual performance meeting, performance review, but it's not standalone. It's kind of like a three-legged stool, right? It's based on the weekly check-ins, on the quarterly summarizations, wrap-ups, on mid-year, wrap-ups, if you will, or reviews, kind of the more formals. And then at the end of the year, you review all of that. So quarterly, weekly, quarterly, and mid-year. And at the end of the year, it takes all of that into account, right? But by the way, compensation, separate thing. Um, Compensation does not need to be linked directly just to the accomplishing of your goals. It's a partial function of it, but not exclusively based on that. What is ongoing and continuous? It's a series of ongoing activities focused on talent development and improving your employees' performance, not merely assessing it, it's improving it. It's agile goal setting, again, not once a year goal, it's agile, meaning it's frequent. For example, the model we believe in most, that we're rooted in, our product is rooted in for performance management, is OKR, objectives and key results. It's a system made popular by Google, right? It's an agile goal setting process and probably the best one there is. Managing and coaching regularly, development planning, rewarding and recognizing. Deloitte research says that organizations with an ongoing focus have better employee, talent, and business results. 100% true, found in research. Check-ins. I told you, a check-in is a thing. It's a topic. Check-in performance framework from Deloitte, right? It's all about setting expectations. This is goals, giving feedback, and growing, improving performance. And the inflection, like that central point where everything overlaps, the three circles, expectation setting or goals, feedback, and growth, and development, improving performance. The intersection of all those is the outcome, is the business impact and employee engagement, which happens with the ongoing model with check-ins, does not happen with the annual once a year traditional legacy outdated performance management that we've been absolutely um, reviewing in the first section of this presentation with all the data points showing how bad it is and how negatively it affects your business. Josh Burson, who is one of the key leaders in analyzing HR and reporting on HR trends and data, and said the feedback, this is the ongoing check-in feedback, is the killer new app. It's not just the technology, it's just the doing it effectively is the new killer app, right? It's a new management model. He wrote this in 2015. This is big new topic. We're back to Donna Morris at Adobe. She said that swapping out the annual review in favor of regular check-ins, again, we're on the check-in concept, it allowed Adobe to have a lightweight process. Lightweight is the keyword, right? It's a few minutes a week, very lightweight, not that big, scary meeting that everybody hates, including HR at the end of the year. Lightweight every week, and this process that's served rather than distracted from people doing their best work, right? So um, the world really isn't on an annual cycle anymore for anything. According to GE, published in this Fortune article, this is Susan Peters, head of HR at GE. The world isn't really on an annual cycle anymore. So we need to do this ongoing, continuous process every week. Things are moving too fast. GE is moving toward continuous touch points. And this is GE, folks. This isn't some young, high growth company that's an early adopter of the best in practice processes. This is GE, a really large global enterprise that's doing this. So if GE is doing this, why are we all not doing this? This was in CNN Money a couple of years ago. Google. So Google made OKRs, objectives and key results, really popular with this one video they launched a couple of years ago. By now, 427,000 people watch this video. And OKRs are these big agile goals process. When I say big, it's simple, but it's big in terms of its impact on your business, right? Setting agile goals, checking in on them frequently, aligning the organization, and helping employees improve performance with this process. Really simple process, but works amazingly effectively. Um, Autodesk is this study out of Deloitte's report called Is Your Performance Management Healthy from 2015. There was a story about Autodesk, how they did, number one, you see goal setting over here. That's the first square. Development, check-ins, and performance. And basically here, the first bullet point, goals are clear and mutually agreed upon. Feedback is ongoing and two-way. Employee development is a top priority, not compliance, employee development. So again, you see a pattern here. This is all about continuous ongoing every week. Tip of the spear is goals, because old school performance management, majority of companies didn't even set goals. And you can't manage performance towards vacuum. You manage it towards goals, towards objectives you agreed on with your employees, and not once a year, but every quarter, and check in on it weekly. Again, I know I'm repeating this very, very important thing to remember. What kinds of companies are doing this and transitioning to modern performance management? All kinds of companies across all kinds of industries, very broad, international. Not just young, high growth companies, any kinds of companies, right? Conagra Foods, Goldman Sachs, right? There's many others, Medtronic. Um, so how do you do it? How do you do it? Look, performance of your company is linked directly to the performance of your people. They're tied together, right? So if you want your company to perform well, you have to make the switch. Um, what is it that your leaders, your managers, the CEO, HR, what do they all want? And even the board? Well, they want organizational alignment. They want to focus everyone on what truly matters and not dissipate the energy across the company. They want higher transparency and accountability. They want to improve the effectiveness of every manager in your hierarchy. If you're a 1,000-person company, you probably have like 150 managers there. They have to be effective. Remember those statistics from Harvard I showed you earlier in the first 10 minutes of the presentation? Those are scary statistics. If your managers truly admit themselves that they're not managing effectively, they're not communicating and giving feedback, you thus, according to this fourth bullet point, you want to improve every manager's effectiveness, because otherwise you're amplifying this ineffectiveness and inefficiency all the way through your organization, through your managers, right? They want data-driven approach to managing decision making. They want to increase performance, drive better results. So there's a shift from traditional to modern. And not to overcomplicate this, I'm just going to say this. It's not a compliance process, it's an empowerment. It's not autocratic, it's all about instead on developing your people. It's not annual, it's agile. Quarterly uh, are more formal, and then weekly are the check-ins. Ongoing weekly, 5 to 10 minutes per week. That's it. And that makes a huge difference on your business, improves your culture, makes everybody feel that this is something meaningful and not a complete waste of time, which is what they're all feeling right now. You've seen the stats. Um, it's focused on results, not just activities, and it's two-way feedback, two-way, right? Where the employee can actually give feedback back to the manager on things that are happening, because in annual performance sit-downs, you know what typically happens. The employee just hears it out and then leaves the room very frustrated. So 8 key steps in making the transition. First of all, tip of the spear. Remember the Wikipedia definition. Agile goals, right? Goal setting process. And again, OKRs is the best way forward with that. OKRs, they're smart goals. They are smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, uh, attainable, relevant, time-based. So everything has to be measurable. Managers and employees do regular weekly check-ins, the concept of check-ins. It's ongoing, it's continuous with two-way feedback where employees get to provide feedback so that the manager can listen, hear it out, right, and support and coach the employee, not just direct them and nothing else. It must be local, and what I mean by that, it must be driven by managers and employees, but empowered and supported by HR. So it's not like something HR just says, hey, people, do it, and I'm going to sit in a meeting. No, it's much more about the one-on-ones that are critical for every manager to manage their people effectively, and it's supported by HR. HR can train, HR can inspire, empower, support it internally, work with managers to assess if it's being done effectively. But HR doesn't sort of roll out the process the way it's been done traditionally at the end of the year, but supports it in an ongoing manner, somewhat behind the scenes, but very much empowered by HR. And basically, look, goals to improve performance, not exclusive. It's not, it should be not exclusive uh, to compensation. To set goals and compensation is 100% a function of them achieving goal or not. There's more that goes into this. There's some of the qualitative concepts that managers glean from these meetings, from people's performance, and that can be supported by HR. It's a more complicated topic in terms of compensation, but it shouldn't be completely 100% a function of just hitting objectives or not. There's research from Gallup that goals combined with feedback increases engagement and performance from employees, right? So not just goals by themselves, and not just a sit down without goals, but combination of those two. And that's part of that check-in. Check-in, tip of the spear is where are you on your goals? For example, OKR goals versus where you should be for the quarter. And then a discussion about that, focusing exclusively on how people are attaining that objective and how can they be coached and helped by their manager. And back to Donna, one of my favorite people in this conversation, because so much has been published about Adobe's progress and success with this. She said that regular, ongoing, continuous conversations between managers and their employees are now occurring without HR's prompting. So whereas annual performance reviews, the once a year model, is always about being prompted by HR, this one is not. Again, remember, supported and empowered by HR. Just really quickly, what does that look like? People ask all the time on these webinars. Well, what does this technology look like? Remember we said earlier that Forrester said it's advanced technology is going to support this transition to the modern method. Well, it's kind of like this. I mean, you can ask weekly, we call it pulse, right? We call it pulse check-ins. Finger on the pulse. How's the employee doing? So Joe over here in this example of a technology is he's the employee, and Jack over here on the top right is the manager of Joe Kaizen, right? And Joe gets to report on a couple of questions that are used to engage and create a conversation, to start a conversation between a manager and employee, right? Tip of the spear is typically goals, and you would see some goals here if Joe had to report on them this in this check-in. And then you can actually have a technology enable a real productive feedback conversation. The feedback can go in here where you see the comment, and then it's not a once a year situation. It's just a very quick 5-minute check-in during the week. And this is, again, just an example. You could use different questions, but there's some standard ones that help you jumpstart the conversation. You can also take notes on Joe's performance every week. And that technology thus combines those notes together. So remember, Adobe spent 40,000 hours between 2,000 managers collecting notes and information. Do you remember that Deloitte admitted they spent 2 million hours amongst all of the managers, executives, and employees, collecting these notes, putting them together to give that annual performance appraisal? All of this in this technology is enabled to be done very quickly because it's being collected maybe in if just 1 or 2 or 3 bullet points every single week. It's already there. You don't have to, at the end of the year, spend those 2 million hours at Deloitte or 40,000 hours at Adobe to pull this data together. It's already going to be collected for you and ready to go. Not for the once a year performance review, but for the quarterly sit downs, or starting with weekly check-ins, quarterly sit downs or semi-annual sit downs, and also for the full wrap up at the end of the year. Now, let's talk about Medtronic. They did this. They transitioned away from the once a year performance review. They killed it. They abolished it. And this was, told by the head of HR at Medtronic in the Washington Post article. When she describes the new system to her HR peers at other companies, she said she hears a lot of, well, I'd love to do that, but she says no one seems ready to follow suit, right? So she would go to these meetups with other HR executives, and she says it seems that this is one of those sacred cows. The typical performance review system doesn't work because you're demotivating half your population, poking them in the eye with a sharp stick, exactly verbatim her quote. And yet, she says it seems like this is one of those sacred cows. I would love to do that, but... And this is her telling her peers that she's done it very successfully. It's incredible that people are not seeing that something works really well and trying and attempting to do it, and instead they're stuck in something old that they know is not working. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you not? When you see data and evidence that it works, why would you not make the shift? What exactly is blocking you from doing the thing that makes everyone at a company much more effective? That makes no sense. So then she says, so far, fears that the changes would lead to some kind of problems internally have gone completely unfounded. People worry that there could be involuntary turnover. She says that it has remained steady. Completely unfounded. There shouldn't be any fear like that. Shouldn't be a sacred cow. She also said, in addition, managers increase freedom in the performance evaluation. By the way, remember, I said it's local, supported, and empowered by HR, but not necessarily driven by HR like the old school sort of traditional performance review. She said that this increased freedom led to double the average merit increases for the truly exceptional performers. Right? So like, whereas remember the statistic that previously top performers were not typically identified in old school performance appraisals, and now they are because it's localized, right? Um, and then lastly, there's a Harvard Business Review article, and I love the title right on the cover page. It's time to blow up HR and build something new. And I love it not because it doesn't really mean to blow up HR, right? It just means that there's a new role for chief HR officer. There's a new, more meaningful, more strategic um, kind of focus on people. That it's not just about checking off boxes, right? Which is like an unfair way to say what has been happening, but the performance management, performance review process has been a compliance checkbox in traditional sense. And today, Harvard Business Review, they've done the research and said, look, I mean, HR's role is so much more important that let's embrace the concept of improving performance, developing your talent. not just checkboxing an old process that actually has proven consistently and not showing any effective impact on the company. In fact, hurting business results rather than helping business results. So the point, and especially from the prior slide, and let me jump to that, is that when it's localized, when it gives managers increased freedom, and when it's not actually ran, quote unquote, or launched and managed by HR, it doesn't mean that HR is not important and that it doesn't actually control the new ongoing performance management process. It doesn't mean that at all. HR, in fact, is playing a super urgent and critical role in empowering the process, in supporting the process, in training internally how to do it well, in leading the way to transitioning the company to this modern, correct, effective process. HR's role is now much, much more significant and strategic in doing that and continuously in ongoing manner making your managers and your employees more effective rather than running this once a year process that doesn't work. So basically the point is that some HR leaders thought that by changing the once a year process to this, they're losing control and they're becoming sort of unimportant within the company as an executive or HR department. It's completely the opposite. You're instilling and leading an effort to do something meaningful, impactful, and positive and effective and getting rid of something that's completely opposite of that. And you're now not going to do this once a year. You're going to support and empower this all the time, continuously, and will lower the cost in your organization in collecting this data in nodes so that it's not 2 million hours per year at Deloitte and 40,000 hours at Adobe. Again, I know I'm repeating everything, but you know what? I'm over communicating and emphasizing these points because these are the tips for 2017. This is exactly what we all came here for. So look, with no further ado, I wanted to give 10 minutes back to your day. And if you have any questions, please email me directly. I typically don't get more than like 3 or 5 emails per webinar, so don't hesitate. Shoot that email over. I'll try to respond within 2 days, maybe sooner. And if you all want to check out a free trial of our product, again, this wasn't a webinar about self-promoting ourselves. We're trying to add value and lead with adding value to you. But if you're interested in learning more how ongoing performance management technology actually works, if you want to try it for free, if you want to just see like a demo just to understand how technology enables this process, we're excited to work with you and help you out. And if you're interested in getting it, great, and if not, you're just interested in seeing it, we're just as happy to help you. Either way, just to add value. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day and a great rest of the week. Take care. Bye-bye.